Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Do Your Ducking Job. Hey there, got to give my first taste of sweet MC yesterday and I share it with you fine people. So I work in an industrial setting consolidating waste. I'm a team lead for one of the crews that work in the primary building. Now, being a team lead I have keys to get into certain places and can drive fork. Now even though it's not my job, sometimes the supervisor, who I'll use Ya for his name, wink wink, for one of the other buildings asks me to get things for his workers. Also, because I drove fork, Ya will ask me to jump on one quickly to help him out, it's never quick. Even though technically I don't have to do these and could refuse, I often comply because why not? Until yesterday. Background, it's been bloody cold and on Monday my crew was saying heater isn't working. Ya has been just saying, it's on, and not dealing with it all week. He is supposed to be the one to draw up work orders for such things as they must be authorized by a supervisor. We aren't allowed to just go to maintenance. So Thursday the heat still isn't on. We are all freezing, even with 3+ layers, and our materials are also beginning to freeze, causing us to not be able to consolidate. I had enough of Ya dodging us, so I went straight to maintenance, and told them what's going on. They came and agreed the heat wasn't on and, just this once, drafted the paperwork themselves as this was kinda necessary. Word got back to Ya about me, still needed his signature, and he calls me to the office. He starts chewing me out about how I disrespected him by not going through him. I tried to say that I've been going on about the heat for days and he didn't do anything about it. Then he said the magical words, "It's not your job, it's mine. You need to do your ducking job and stop whining about the heat." I had it then, so I gave him a very sarcastic yes sir and a salute and left the office. He wrote me up, but the union got it torn up by end of the day. Now I spent all that night brewing. I was still mad about it Friday. Well, sure enough he sent one of the guys to me to open a lock, and that's when it hit me. It's Jaz's job to do that, I was doing it out of courtesy. I just put my hands up and say, it ain't my job, go get Ya. Supervisors and leads can't just give keys, they have to go themselves. I explain why to the guy and he just laughs and walks back. 5 minutes later I hear Ya on the radio calling me outside. I meet him and he is fuming. He goes off a little on what the big idea is. I parrot to him those magical words, it's your job, not mine. I'm just doing my job. He stands there just staring angrily, shakes his hands, and mutters whatever. He then asks me to go grab a lift because he needs some pallets shifted. Again, I refuse and parrot. Well, I guess that did it because he turned a delightful shade of red. That began an immediate attempt of him trying get me fired for insubordination, remove me as lead. The union defends me saying it really isn't really my job. Union wins, I'm still led and now I have the image of his red face to keep me warm this weekend. Update, so, I didn't see much of Ya today. He's here but hasn't interacted with me. After lunch I was asked to come to the office. There was someone I didn't know and my union steward there. He asked me about the heat and why I went to maintenance. Didn't ask me about my run-in with Ya. I answered and was sent back to the floor. Asking around I found out that guy was someone up the chain. I'll update again if anything comes of it. UPDATE number 2, so it's been a few days. Still haven't heard much from Ya. He's still around. Not much else has happened. Union came back around to have me sign off on the dismissal attempt. I assume Ya probably got a slap on the wrist or at worst a written warning. Next one is titled, Just Do My Job? Great, we will do exactly. Okay, so a while back I was working as half the IT team for a plant owned by a large company that deals in fried legumes, among other things. Me and my buddy managed the network, services and did maintenance for 100 or so laptops in the plant and associated sites in the city. Not too stressful most of the time. Then there was Gina. Most of the time dealing with the users are good. Gina was one of the glowing exceptions. One day, Gina made what we call an oopsie. In a moment of clumsy, her powered on and working laptop fell 1 meter, and then stopped working. Which is fine, it happens. What was not fine was her bad attitude when she came over to the IT office. As other IT guys might have already guessed, her HD was ruined. Upon inspection, the rest of the machine was fine, it was just the hard drive. Gina was not pleased. You see, Gina had some very important files and emails in her computer that she absolutely needed to work. Company policy says you have to have a cloud backup that we provide, but users have to upload their own files. Of course, Gina neglected this and was holding both of us responsible for her inability to do her job. An opinion which she expressed in increasingly rude language. "Don't come up with excuses, just do your job," was her exact phrase, as she turned to leave. And boy did we do our job to the letter. You see, if it's super urgent and the user simply needs a functioning computer to work, we can take a functioning hard drive from a dead laptop, saving us the usual 2 weeks it takes for replacement part to be delivered. Also, the use of file recovery software on malfunctioning hard drives is not authorized, but we will attempt it if the files are critical enough. But we were doing our jobs to the letter, so none of that either. In the end, a repair job that would have been completed in a day, actually took 17 days as soon as the replacement hard drive arrived. And because our backup laptops were already loaned out, she had nowhere to work and had to manage. As a result, she fell behind on a lot of work. Also, she never did get her files back. Next one is titled, I mean, if you want to be at work an extra 3 hours. Back in my retail days, I was working at a certain large blue and yellow electronics store selling phones. My department had an unofficial rule: don't start any new cell phone transactions a half hour before closing. This was for 2 reasons. 1. The support we had for the phone carriers was East Coast time and generally closed an hour before the store closed. 2. I don't know if anybody here has bought a cell phone on a contract, but that can take forever if something goes wrong. My general manager openly hated this rule. He got his bonus off of customer surveys, and any time a customer left even mildly dissatisfied, he'd have a very mild heart attack. So, obviously last-minute customers being told, "Sorry, we can't do that," are generally pretty grumpy. After a year of working there, I ended up as the most senior person in the department and certainly the one with the most knowledge about its inner functions. I was also, almost always, the closer. Onto the malicious compliance. My general manager was badgering me every night for months about helping customers after our usual half-hour cutoff. Normally I'd just deny him and explain that if he wanted them to be taken care of right then, he could do it himself. He'd back off. He has no idea how to sell a phone, and when he's tried he screws up. This particular night I saw a large family walking in, beelining toward my department at 8:45 p.m. We closed at 9. I was in a capricious mood and decided this would be the night that my general manager would stop bugging me. The family rolls up, I give them the spiel. "Sorry, we can't do any activations after 8:30 blah blah blah." They look sad and start to head back out, and right on cue, my general manager walks up to them, chats for a bit, then starts heading to me for my nightly, "Oh come on, can't you help them? I know it's late." Me, "You know what, general manager? I'll take care of them. You're closing up the doors, right? It might run a little late." General manager, "Yep, I'm closing the store tonight." Perfect. I'd chatted with this particular family the other day. They didn't speak English that well. They were porting in from like 3 different prepaid carriers, and the company they were trying to open an account for is known for being the worst. So I start the transaction. By 9:30 p.m., there's major problems. 2 of the ports aren't going through because I was given the wrong info for the port. Everything's going to crap. I look at my manager, I smile, and he smiles back. He doesn't know how bad everything's going. Around 10 p.m., he's checking his watch, he's getting antsy. It's just me, him and the customers in the store. At 10:30, he asks me how much longer I'm going to be. I answer, I don't know, and explain everything that's going wrong. He asks if I can call that company's account support. Lol, they closed 3 hours ago. 11 p.m. rolls around, he's just sitting on a counter across the store, alternating between dicking around on his phone and staring at me. 11:30 rolls by, he looks visibly upset. Keep in mind, this is a man with the same personality as drywall, seeing any emotion on his face is rare. We hit midnight. I've somehow fixed one of the port errors, most everything else is still screwed beyond my abilities without calling the carrier. General Manager, hey, Bailey the nerd, is this going to be much longer? Maybe we should call it a night. Me, yeah, to be entirely honest, there's nothing I could have done for them as soon as things started going wrong. Me, I've spent the last 2 hours fixing problems I have no business even attempting to fix, and somehow I've made some minute progress. However, I know customer satisfaction is important to you, and I'm willing to stay the 5 more hours I'd need to get this even kind of working for them. General Manager, okay, tell them to come back tomorrow and we'll finish up. Me, by the way, we haven't been able to finalize the purchase for the phones, so they can't take the new ones, and the ports that did work means that their old phones don't work. So you're gonna have to tell them that their phones aren't gonna work tonight. General Manager, Me, sure wish there was some way we could have avoided starting a process like this with no possibility for support from the carrier. They could have made quick work of this. The GM never questioned me about the half-hour rule from that point on, and made a point of coming to me whenever cell phone carrier questions were brought up. Which was honestly a long time coming, because I trained my department manager, assistant manager, and 9 associates how to do the cell phone stuff before I left. Shortly after that, he'd also stopped trying to help in our section by taking customers there and trying to do our jobs when we weren't looking. I swear I had to kick him out of our section for months before he finally realized he was out of his depth with the cellular crap. Next one is titled, Coming After My Job? Hope you like doing things by yourself. Long story short, I used to work for Sam's Club in their cafe. For anyone that's never been to one, we served run-of-the-mill fast food, chicken tenders, hamburgers, hot dogs, etc. for really, really cheap. Where I'm at, the job pays $11 an hour, which is the highest pay you can get in unskilled labor in these parts. When I'd had to take a year off school because of some mental and emotional issues, it was basically what gave me a means to live, and I stayed there about a year before I left. So, basically, this is where the story begins. I worked with about 7 other people, and I got along pretty well with most of my co-workers, and they all liked me because I actually showed up and did the work, except one. We'll call her Ray. Ray was your textbook definition of an entitled witch, and did her best to show you up every chance she got. You got a raise. Hers was higher. You got a pat on the back from a manager. Oh, they do that to everybody. Not to mention, if you made a mistake, she made sure you knew it. It didn't matter what it was either. I've seen her talk down to people for missing a spec on the counter, and then going to report them to management for harassment when they tried to defend themselves. She also liked to use her anxiety to manipulate people to leave them alone up front on purpose when they wronged her, so she could stay in the back and wash dishes, out of sight, and play on her phone. She did this to me a number of times. The whole department hated her, but had no reason to fire her since she never really broke the rules. Well, cue midsummer. There was a local anime convention I wanted to go to with my friends, and I made sure to take off at least a month and a half in advance to give management time to find a replacement for me while I used my PTO. I was also extra considerate to my co-workers, making sure to get as much done as I could before I left the night before my absence to leave the morning crew with little to do. Management, as well as my co-workers, were all aware that I wouldn't be there for almost 4 days, and so did she. However, this didn't stop her from crying that I was skipping work because I hated working there and my mental disorder made the job too much to handle, and that I'd been threatening to quit so they should just fire me. I'd tried to comfort her in the past before I realized she was a liar during one of her fake panic attacks by saying I understood how she felt because I actually had a diagnosed problem. Management, of course, waved her off and my co-workers laughed at her. However, when I found out she'd come after my job, I was absolutely livid. Not only did I depend on this job to survive, but I was also depending on it for financial aid purposes in the fall, which would be jeopardized if I lost it. Cue malicious compliance. I'd told my department head about what had happened, and while she really didn't have any power to discipline anyone other than rolling the issue over to management, where nothing would be done, or sending you home for the day, she did have the power to assign duties. So, she started assigning me to stay in the back, and Ray to the front. My other co-workers eventually caught on, and joined in. Every time she would try to play on her phone while the rest of us were busy, she would be ushered to the front and center, and forced to run everything mostly by herself, no matter how long the lines were. We would only do what was expected of us, and nothing more. People also stopped covering shifts for her too, because she pulled the same stunt with several others. And when she pulled her fake panic attacks to try and get out of it, she was told to go home, without pay, if she couldn't handle the work. Thankfully, I did get to leave that poo hole, and now work for a very large tech company as an app developer. I'm also back in school, and happier than ever, and guess where she is? Still there. Every time I've come in to shop at the store since on my parents' club card, she's always in the cafe, working by herself. Next one is titled, "You Start at 7, You Finish at 7. Not sure if this truly belongs here, but here it goes. I used to work at a car company about 2 to 3 years ago as a telephonist on the night shift doing 12-hour shifts. It was pretty good, 4 days working 3 days off, and the pay was decent. However, most people didn't take their job seriously. They would call in sick or just not show up for work at all, and especially on nights when there were only four of us. If one person didn't show up, you felt it. I was a star employee. I showed up early, logged in, and started working usually from 6:30. I never took a sick day. Changed my holidays to fit the company's needs and worked any overtime they needed me to work. I was so dedicated to my role that I had worked on multiple occasions 18 to 24 hours as people wouldn't show up for shifts and they needed cover. It was my first real job, and I believed in the company. I used the train system to get to and from work, and always planned out my routes around as much as I could to avoid being late. However, on this particular day they were running a reduced service. Due to breakdowns, a lot of the trains had been repaired using less than stellar parts, and the wheels kept sticking to the track when they hit the brakes, causing wearing on the wheels in specific spots. So a lot of trains were out of commission. On top of that, the train I was on had been stopped due to a signal issue for 15 to 20 minutes. This led me to being late. I had shown up about 10 minutes late to the start of my shift. Before I had even sat down, my manager was giving me grief. Apparently they were mad because I had stopped other telephonists going home, as someone had to work 10 extra minutes to cover my shift, and as 2 people were ill and couldn't make it in. Now I hate being late. I was already upset that I was late, but my manager giving me trouble as soon as I walked through the door just irritated me even more. My reply to him was as follows: "Apologies, I was late. However, how many times have I ever been late? I show up 30 minutes before my shift every day. I have stayed late to covers days before the train had an issue and it was out of my control. I was stuck underground with no signal to call or text to let you know." My manager didn't give a duck, and their reply to me was, "You start at 7, you finish at 7. You are in early on your own time. Those times you have stayed behind, you have been paid and no one asked you to." "Okay then," was my reply. The next day was extremely busy. My colleague had left and only one of the morning guys had shown up for his shift to take over. As he sat down, I began to pack up. At 7 a.m. on the dot I left. As I usually helped out when this happened, everyone was surprised and had asked me where I was going. My only reply was, "I start at 7, I finish at 7. This was my final shift, and so I was off for the next few days. On my first shift back, I get pulled into the office by my manager with HR. They ask me why I left a single telephonist on their own. I looked at my manager and repeated the exact same words that were said to me. My manager informed me I start at 7, I finish at 7. The look on HR's face was priceless. She was pissed. She already had a staff issue to deal with, and on top of that, one of her most helpful staff members had been mugged off by a manager. She told me to go back to my desk and she needed to speak to the manager in question. 0 minutes later, the manager came back in looking absolutely defeated. He never ever said anything to me again about being late. Last one is titled, You Want My Most Experienced Employee? Well, okay. A few years ago I worked for Company X as the manager of some key administrative staff and had a chance to serve up some malicious compliance. A bit of background. At the time of the MC I had 4 employees: generic employee, rockstar, new guy and dipshit could not be fired as he was related to some very senior managers, nepotism at its best. We worked closely with the ops team where one of our responsibilities was to perform certain tasks, without which the entire operation would grind to a halt. At the time there had been some expansion and a second shift was introduced, thus new guy was hired. Like anytime something new happened there were a lot of teething issues. At the time dipshit and generic employee were covering the new afternoon shift, rotating weekly, while I had new guy learning the ropes on the morning, where the workload was a lot heavier, with rockstar and generic employee, dipshit on their week of mornings. Anyhow, as mentioned, there were some problems with introducing a new shift and the ops manager, who I had worked with in the past, and we didn't really get along, did as most managers do when something isn't going right, passed the blame over to our end. To be fair, some truth to it, however dipshit was a minor cause at best. One thing I really didn't like about ops manager was she was the type to go behind your back and be nothing but smiles to your face. At the time ops manager wanted rockstar on her shift, because he was the type of person who would constantly go above and beyond to make things happen, fix her problems. Instead of asking me if it was possible, ops manager went to our boss's boss to complain that everything that was going wrong was due to my department and how she needed my most experienced employee on her shift. The next day I got an email from the boss with ops manager, my boss and her boss copied in. Please ensure your most experienced employee is on the afternoon shift to help ops manager. I was a little annoyed. I must have spent about 10 minutes just looking at that email, my temper consistently rising the entire time. Until it finally dawned on me, ops manager wanted rockstar but the request was for my most experienced employee. What ops manager didn't realize was that dipshit had started about 2 months before rockstar and a few years before generic employee. Suddenly I was in a great mood and must have had the biggest poo-eating grin on my face as I typed my reply. Hi the boss, we are of course happy to help ops manager with the multitude of issues that is happening within her shift. As such, dipshit, being my most experienced employee, will spend the next 8 weeks working only on ops manager's shift. My boss and I had a great laugh over it as it was essentially career suicide to complain about dipshit. There was nothing ops manager could do but grin and bear it. Thanks for listening.